Welcome into Basketball by Association. My name is Arky. Shea. That is Joel C. Cordes. Joel, welcome to June. That means the National Basketball Association of American Basketball has its final series ready to go. And Joel, just as we predicted when we started the season, it's the Nuggets and the Heat. It just the NBA is so chalk. I just don't understand why anybody would watch it. But whatever, Joel. How are you with this?
Mission accomplished. Series? We got him. We got him. Congratulations first to the show, because this is our fourth NBA Finals that we've covered here in this iteration of Basketball by Association. We covered a handful in the previous life of this show, which was over at Bleacher Report a long time ago. I think this might be yours and my third finals together, so that's kind of cool. But it's neat. And speaking of guys who have had a neat career, let's name the episode real quick. You're going to get this one awfully quickly because there just are so few that fit this category.
Okay.
This gentleman really has no career accolades to speak of, except that he was on the 03-04 rookie team. But he's logged 148 career playoff games. He is still active in the NBA, despite the fact that he has only appeared in 65 total games since the 2016 season. That'd be the 15-16 season. So it's been a while, 65 games over that entire time, and yet this gentleman, Arky Shea, will be in the NBA Finals, which tip off tonight. He is one of few players in NBA history to have stayed with the same team their entire career, and this man has done it for 20 years. And who knows, will he add ring number 4 to his hand as he goes out for this final season? It's been a neat career for this guy. You got to know who it is.
Would he already have? Would this be 4 for him? I guess
this will be 4 rings. He has won 3 rings already with this team that he has been with.
So the Udonis Haslem?
It's the UD episode.
I was trying to think, like, was he on? Has he been on those champion? He was on those championship teams. So okay.
He was starter sometimes, off the bench at other times.
03-04 rookie team.
Yeah.
So who's 03-04? 03-04. That's LeBron, right?
I believe so. And Basketball
I'm talking about the year. That's LeBron's on that. He's in that year. So Melo's in that year. Dwayne Wade came out, I think, in that year. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think Bosch is in that year too. We really should know this, but
that's a pretty decent little.
It's been a busy day.
That's a pretty decent little class, right? I mean, come on, not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad.
I'm looking over to that all rookie team if it'll pull it.
Yeah, I don't know the rookie team. When you led with the all rookie team, I was like, hell, I don't know, because at first you started to give like the LeBron hints until you got to the still playing in this finals, and I was like, all right, who could possibly still be playing in this finals? It's Nikola Jokic. So, the Udonis Haslem episode. All right, this is definitely the first time we've named an episode.
Here's the all rookie team. Thank you, Basketball Reference, real quick, and then we're gonna go. Okay. First team was Melo, Bosch, Kirk Heinrich, LeBron, and Dwayne Wade. That was first team all rookie. Second team all rookie, Marquise Daniels, TJ Ford, Udonis Haslem, Jarvis Hayes, and Josh Howard. UD, the only guy besides LeBron from that list who is still in the league and still playing. Although playing is done with air quotes here.
Well, that's what I'm saying. When you think about the other guy that's still playing, technically, like as far as being active, like you think about LeBron, and no one's like, yeah, he's definitely hanging up. Like, how's he still on the roster, kind of thing. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. Well, I guess that's what happens when you're deciding between one of the greatest of all time and just another really good player that's had a lot of years where he's been able to suit up.
And a guy who's going to have his jersey in the rafters right next to LeBron and right next to oh yeah, without a doubt. Without a doubt. As soon as he retires, Haslam's going to get that jersey up in the rafters. It's going to be right next to LeBron and Zoe and Tim Hardaway and Bosch and Wade, just the huge stars that have been there in Miami, but here's the hard hat guy, here's the blue collar guy.
And he's never been anywhere else. Right? He's never been anywhere else.
His first season, he played in France before coming over to the NBA.
So he's not a lifer. He's a slight lifer.
Arky Shea, kicking people in the shins.
Hey, listen, I'll just say this about Udonis Haslem, and then we move on. There is a remarkableness about a player who's able to stay in this day and age. And by this, I mean, even the last 10, 15 years, especially since free agency has been what it is, but even since it's turned into like super team era, right? Where everybody's just moving constantly, for a team to want you to stay in one place for so long and for you to want to stay in one place for so long, it is a truly remarkable kind of synergy that is there between that franchise and Udonis Haslem. So,
and the fact he's from Miami, born in Miami, raised in Miami, it's a fairy tale, really. If you think about the little kid Udonis Haslem,
he went to college in Florida. He went to he didn't go to Miami. No, Florida. He went to Florida, right? He was on that champion. No, was he on the championship team?
Let's look this up.
Florida basketball.
He went to Florida.
No.
Well, he debuted in 03. We'd have to go back and look. We're wasting too much time. We got coaches to talk to.
We're talking about. We're talking about. This is the Udonis Haslem episode. We talk everything about Udonis Haslem. Before we get to any coaches and stuff, I really just want to talk about the games themselves. But since we have not had a chance to talk about Game 7, and then we'll lead into the finals. Joel, nobody thought this Miami Heat team would have what it was left in the tank for the Game 7 in Boston. Everyone thought clearly the momentum was gone. Right before we texted each other right after this podcast, you texted me telling me that Gabe Vincent was out. What for game? Was that 6 or 5? That was 6, right?
Yeah.
Then you're like, oh, well, that doesn't seem good. and it wasn't good, obviously, for Miami. And then sort of the momentum and everything sort of felt like it shifted towards Boston. But every time you want to give Boston the benefit of the doubt and you want to discount Miami at the same time, you're left with sore testicles because you've been kicked in them, because that's what both of these two teams do to you. One folds when I want to talk about some strategy with that real quick too, but also the other team just proves that they are so mentally tough, so physically tough, and they are so extremely well coached that every time you want to count them out, you should just stop talking, because it's just not true.
Would the game have been different if Jason Tatum doesn't roll the ankle on the first play and is, by his own words, a shadow of himself? Maybe. But
Jason Tatum's had games in that series where he shot one time in the fourth quarter and 3 times in the third quarter. At home, I think it was at home. I think it was game 1. I think it was game 1 of this series.
Here's the big caveat of that. Maybe based on what I saw in that game, it would have taken Jason Tatum heroics for them to be able to win. It's not just, we needed Jason Tatum doing all right. No, it would have taken heroics for them to get through it. And there's the possibility, because he's done that before, that they could have. But Miami, with or without a healthy Jason Tatum, was in the driver's seat again of that game, a closeout game on an opponent's floor. Credit the Celtics for, tying it up to Game 7. Let's be real. They were so dead in the water after Game 3, and to come back and fight, they were good. And were they a little gassed in Game 7? Maybe, but the Heat should have been more gassed than anybody. That shouldn't have.
Well, I do want to say, based on that, you want to give them credit. Something that you had talked about after Game 4 is that you saw them doing a lot more attacking of the basket and stuff. And instead of just trying to find sort of the right pass, the perfect pass, and they started attacking. And they did that in Game 4, and they did that in Game 5, and they did that some in Game 6. And all of a sudden, you're like, okay, now this team with that kind of mentality and that talent behind them can do damage.
And the shots started to finally go down too.
And stopped going down for Miami.
Yes, exactly.
And so then you're like, okay, this is how I see Boston able to sort of pull this through that this confluence of events. And then, as you mentioned already, going into Game 7, Tatum rolled that ankle immediately, but he still played like 40 minutes in that game. And I know he was
right. And Vincent came back. Vincent came back and was effective. They, the Heat needed that extra body.
And Miami didn't win by 6.
No.
Right. That game was all Miami all the time. And I could see sort of having your wind taken out of your sails early in that game because of that rolled ankle. But it's like I said, it's not as if Tatum didn't try to man up and play the entire game. He was a little reduced, and everyone else sort of seemed like well, if Tatum's not going to carry us, who's going to be the guy?
Mhm.
And Jaylen Brown wasn't that guy either on Game 7 either.
No, and sixth man of the year, Malcolm Brogdon,
who's played really well this postseason.
Dealing with a ligament injury in the arm that normally would require surgery. Like, he would have had season-ending surgery again, which has happened way too many times for Brogdon, and instead plays through it and was completely ineffective this entire series, really on both ends, even as a defender, and he's a solid guy on that end. Could not shoot the ball. They needed it. Nobody was hitting shots in Boston. We've seen that happen a couple of times. You look at the Celtics and the takeaway from them, too jump shot heavy of a team loaded with good defenders, but that needs a scheme overhaul. I don't know if that's a Joe Mazzulla thing or if that's a time thing to have a real training camp together. I don't know if it's the fact that Joe Mazzulla never got to pick his own staff. You know, he jumped in with the existing guys, and now we'll get a chance with Brad Stevens to try to rework things. So I think some of it is scheme.
Because everyone's leaving to follow Ime Udoka at Houston. Did you see like 3 of their assistants are going to Houston?
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. It doesn't surprise me because of their ties, I guess, to Ime Udoka, but also it's not as if Joe Mazzulla gave them a bunch of reasons to stay, right? As far as the way he coached, in that series. And we talked a lot in this series about Game 1, the third quarter, don't call timeouts, so on, so to speak, and how Joe Mazzulla sort of seemed like he got outcoached a lot of times. It seemed like 4, 5, and 6 felt like was definitely a better showing by Boston.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because they won. Does he look like a better coach simply because they won? Which is the chicken or the egg,
Well, here's the thing.
You got a point.
Is it Joe Mazzulla tell him, hey, you got to start attacking more? Or is it the players saying, we just got to go attack more? Because you got players on the staff that were players that are talking about Joe Mazzulla in particular saying, during this postseason, he's learning as he goes. So is that Joe Mazzulla learning? Or is that players taking it on themselves in a do or die situation in Game 4? You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it's sort of going to be really hard to sort of know what that answer is. I know no one in Boston is very happy at all about the way this season has unfolded from the
get in line next to fans in Milwaukee and New York, friends.
Especially for the fact that they gave him an extension right when he was about favorite for coach of the year. Everyone's like, oh, this is going to go great. And then it's sort of a learning lesson for everybody else.
The cracks started to show a little bit along the way.
Let's see what a guy who's never done this before can do when it's the hardest time to do this. And it's okay. I never need to see Boston win another game, so it's fine with me. I don't need Miami to win a game either. Don't like him because I had a friend who tweeted, this is I don't know, the 6th time, the Heat are the team that's been to the finals the most since 2005. And as much as I've sort of hated on, the Celtics, I sort of forget quietly that Miami's been one of the most consistent franchises in all the NBA.
They've done it with so many different iterations too. Is it's not like one dynasty. It's a bunch of different chapters in the franchise that. Yeah, the Heatles feel like a dynasty because they went to 4 in a row, but they only won 2. They were quasi-dynastic, but you had Dwayne Wade before that going a couple of times. You've got this appearance. You had the appearance a couple of years ago. It's a real testament to Pat Riley and the organization and to Eric Spoelstra. I mean, Eric Spoelstra is the constant through most of this.
The guy's got 7 undrafted players on that roster to play. Caleb Martin was the number 2 guy for MVP in the series and almost won the MVP, the Eastern Conference Finals MVP. Jimmy Butler beat him by 1 vote. I mean, Caleb Martin's not a guy that I think anybody talked about throughout the regular season, for any reason.
Fringe NBA player coming into this and just a body that the Heat were going to take a look at.
What did I see? He had 130 132 points in the conference finals, and this is the sad stat. He passed John Starks in the 1994 NBA Finals for the most points in the conference or NBA Finals by an undrafted player in the modern era. That's one thing I no longer have my hat to hang my hat on. But yeah, you're right. So now we got the Miami Heat taking on the Denver Nuggets, who still exist, even though we haven't had a chance to talk about them in 2 weeks on this podcast. Joe, let me ask you this. We have we both said last week, doesn't matter who wins with Boston and in Miami, we think Denver's going to win.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I should still think that, but I don't know if I'm allowed to legally after what I keep watching this 8-seed Miami Heat do. So I'm saying this is a 7-game series. I have no idea how's it going to go.
I have used logic and common sense to pick every round the Heat have been in so far this playoffs, and I've been flat out wrong every time. So logic and common sense says Denver in 6. Denver's at home. Denver's been great all year. You go and you look at the playoff stats. Denver and Miami are really close. They're middle of the pack offensively, typically. They're upper echelon defensively. They're within about 2 spaces of each other. But Denver is always the one on top in nearly every metric. And again, you get to go back to Denver to start this thing out. It should be 6. Denver is the more talented team. But every team Miami has faced in the playoffs has been more talented than them. And I'll tell you what, Denver being off this long, does that negate some of the advantage that you get from playing in Mile High City right away, where Miami is fresh tired? They're tired, yeah, but they've been on this heater for so long, no pun intended. Like, they're going to come into it, and yeah, the altitude may mess with them, but it may mess with the Nuggets just from the rusty aspect of it. If Miami is able to march in and steal game 1 of this series,
which they've won every game 1 in this.
Yes. They have done that in every single series of the playoffs. If they march in and steal game 1, all bets are off and Miami becomes the favorite. Just everything goes out the window. Miami is back in the driver's seat, forcing someone else to play catch up, and all of the inherent advantages that Miami has, the intangibles, now become enormous. If Denver wins game 1, good for Denver. It means nothing except to get you to game 2, because we've been calling Miami Heat the undead for a while, and it's apt. They are an absolute zombie team. They do not go away. So Denver, it's a 1 game at a time thing. For Miami, it's win game 1. Win game 1, and you are in a very good position to do what you do so well, and that's to muck things up and throw everybody else's schemes right out the window.
Yeah, I think the thing that is so tough about this is that long layoff for Denver. It's not as if Denver was beat up. It's not as if Denver needed a rest. It's not as if Denver struggled a lot in this postseason at any point. It's not as if anything but the fact that they had so much momentum coming off the fact they were able to come back. What game 3 against Los Angeles, and then win game 4 late. I don't see any other way than this isn't a tight series. Even if, like you said, if Denver wins game 1, Miami's not going away. Miami is so freaking mentally there. Every possession.
Every player. Even the pit guys.
Everyone.
Even Cody Zeller or Haywood Highsmith coming in off the bench are doing their job to the letter of the law every single time.
Yeah, and I don't know. Do you know the latest on whether or not Tyler Herro has a chance at all to come back in this series?
He's out for game 1. They've already ruled him out.
Right,
they said they've got some steps. They've not talked series wide. My guess would be game 3. Back in Miami, we might get a Hero sighting. But there again, you run that risk of, our chemistry so good, do you run a guy in who's going to steal minutes from somebody who is absolutely locked in doing their job? Or do you keep Hero in the Duncan Robinson role, the former Duncan Robinson role, of kind of being a relief pitcher, where if some of your other guys are struggling, maybe Duncan Robinson himself not shooting the ball particularly well through the first couple games, or in game 3 when his first stint is done, and then you bring Hero in and you just see if you can get something out of him. If I was Spoelstra, that's what I would do. I would not try to insert Hero back into the starting lineup or major minutes. Like, the guys who are there have earned this.
Yeah, don't
Hero's
rush
going to
it.
have to work off some rust. He's been hurt. But if he's healthy enough to go, keep him in your back pocket because he might be the guy who comes in and scores 10 points in a quarter out of nowhere in 6 minutes. And all of a sudden he gets back into a groove and he's usable the rest of the series. And he helps you if somebody like Robinson, who is so hot and cold, all of a sudden is having an off night.
I don't disagree with just slow playing him back in, you know. I think that's probably the smartest thing to do with him. I'm a big believer, especially if you're sort of, I guess no one is that at this point technically in the season, but if you're the underdog in this series, like most people are expecting Denver, like just like most people expected everybody but Miami in the series
Right.
before. But if you're going to fight the underdog role, the team that's fought the entire underdog role this entire season, just keep them together. But yes, give Tyler Hero some time. I'm trying to look. When was the last game Tyler Hero played and how long ago that was?
It was at the beginning of the playoffs here.
Yeah, I'm just trying to see how long the time frame that we're.
I think it was game 2 of the Bucks series.
It might have been game 2, which
I thought it was the one where they got absolutely shellacked in Milwaukee and they lose Hero and we're like, all right, nice work, Miami, stealing game 1, you're done. And it was not that way.
Yeah, so we're looking at what 5.5, 6 weeks almost since that game in that ballpark. I don't think Tyler Hero needs to be rushed back, but if I'm Denver, that game 1 turns out to be so critical for you. Because if it was Boston, right? Boston will give you chances to get back in the series, mess up even at home. Miami I think Miami, when they lost that game against Boston at home, that was their first home loss. Like they don't lose at home in the postseason for the most part. And they play really tough on the road, and with their defense travels. But here's the thing I think is different. And then I'll let you say words. The thing that's different to me between Denver and Boston and Denver and Miami and Boston is that Denver, as much as we think they are the favorite, they play a style defensively that I think is much more consistent with being able to not give up 30 straight points without a timeout, to be able to slow a team like Boston down and slow themselves, but Miami down. Neither one of these teams particularly likes to sprint up and down the court, even though they're very capable of doing it. They'll take those opportunities. But Boston just was not a physical, good defensive team this entire year. Denver is. And I think that's why this becomes a dogfight all 7 games. I think you have 2 teams that don't mind mucking it up, but I do think Denver still should be the favorite because they've got guys that are – Jimmy Butler's the dude on his team, right? Yeah, Jokic is clearly the dude on Denver, but Jamal Murray just had an amazing Western Conference Finals that people have just forgotten about because it hasn't happened in 2 weeks.
Murray is as much co-dude as Jokic is, in all honesty, and I think Jokic wants it that way. You know, it wouldn't have to be that way, but I think it is.
There is more depth on this team, Denver, than Miami, but there's also I'm less wanting to punch Miami in the face for that, like I was, against Boston and New York. I don't think it was that much deeper, but New York was a better, deeper team. Just wasn't. They didn't have the dudes all 6 games to be able to win that series. And then Milwaukee, without Giannis. Injuries aside, this to me is a Denver series to win, but I do think it's 7.
So, yeah, there's some caveats to what Miami has done, and it's not to take away anything from them because as they've done throughout the Eric Spoelstra era, especially when it hasn't been the Heatles, they've just taken advantage of other teams making mistakes. Milwaukee didn't have a healthy Giannis, as you said. New York had some Julius Randle injury issues, but New York is also the team that I think punch for punch took Miami the furthest and made them work the most, and that was the most evenly matched series. And Miami just was able to best New York. Boston got out-coached routinely and then had some heroics to stick around longer and delay the inevitable. Denver is fully at strength. Mike Malone, if he gets out coached by Eric Spoelstra, it's not going to be by that much. And Malone's going to know what's going on because he's been around the block way long enough, and his coaching staff has been around the block together completely long enough.
Mike Malone's calling a timeout in that third quarter.
Right. Yeah. Right. And the variables, I guess, or the X factors that I see for both sides on the Miami side, it's Bam Adebayo. Because he is going to have to guard Nikola Jokic straight up without fouling the bulk of this series. Unlike the Lakers, who found something interesting and they were running Rui Hachimura at Jokic and allowing Anthony Davis to play weak side help, Miami doesn't have a body like that. Yeah, you can say, well, Jimmy Butler could guard Jokic. All right, if you want to do that, but you're going to gas Jimmy Butler and potentially get him in foul trouble. Kevin Love's not going to do it. He will get eaten alive. Cody Zeller will give you the 6 fouls that he has, and he will be technically proficient in dishing out those 6 fouls, but that's all he will do. They do not have any other bodies unless you're going to be calling in the third string center, Omer Yurtseven. I don't like that. So this is really on Bam. And if he gets in foul trouble or is passive, I don't think there's a scenario where he can effectively play off of Jokic and somebody else does that instead. That ties into the Jokic thing. I mean, a lot of times European players, this has been dispelled for a long time, but for a while, and I think it still hangs around with some people, there was still this idea that like European players were kind of soft, maybe not as mentally tough sometimes, and Jimmy Butler's got this in spades. Does Denver's star player, their dude, does he have that same mentally toughness? Guys, the Serbian players are a different breed. They're not the same as the rest of the Euro guys. The Serbian players have long been, they've been killers. They've been killers. And I don't think Jokic at this point in his career and everything he's been through is going to be fazed by Jimmy Butler being a try-hard Jimmy Butler. To his credit, I'm not knocking Jimmy. Like, Jimmy's going to do his thing and Jokic is going to go great and not be fazed with it and still have that same expression on his face as he mopes up and down the court, you know, playing at a Hall of Fame level. So for me, I'm not real worried about Jokic. I think Murray's going to be hot and cold. Miami's going to throw.
He's got to deal with that with Murray.
Murray's going to get the kitchen sink thrown at him from Miami. But
he should.
Murray's been around long enough to see that. The 2 guys for Denver that I think are X factors that I'm a little bit worried about, Aaron Gordon and Michael Porter Jr., the 2 forwards, because Miami's scrambling quasi-zone, quasi-man defense that is just flying all over the court. And normally, NBA teams would be able to counter that over-aggressiveness and make somebody pay for closing out that hard, for flying around like that. They would attack that. Teams have not done that against this Miami Heat in the playoffs because, as we said, a lot of them were trying to pass to the perfect open man instead of running through the defense like Boston figured out. But also because Miami's just been so good and so on a string that even when it looks like they're out of control flying around, everybody on the backside has their rotation down and is in position and is able to jump a passing lane. So if Michael Porter Jr. goes cold and starts getting sped up on shots because the closeout is coming hard, or Aaron Gordon starts chucking up points because chucking up outside shots because it's too hard for him to put his head down and barrel through the defense, or he's getting sped up on passes, those are a lot of turnovers and missed shots and empty possessions waiting to happen where Jokic already did his thing and delivered the ball to the right guy and they didn't do the right thing with it. And Jamal Murray is being guarded so heavily elsewhere that Miami is forcing these couple of Denver guys who have had their moments in the playoffs, both good and bad, to really decide things. I'm not worried about role players like Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and Bruce Brown and Jeff Green. Those guys are veterans. They know how to do it. They're hard-nosed. They're gonna be physical, I think, back with the Heat players. Aaron Gordon likes to be physical. Will he be as physical when he's getting it as good as he gives? And Michael Porter Jr., I think, is going to see attention and closeouts and pressure like he has yet to see in his NBA career. And what will he do with that? That may be the X factor in the series. I know we got coaches to talk about quick here too.
Yeah, real quick, I would just say also, I do. I think Denver just needs the shots to fall, but I think they'll be ready and better for game one. Denver's essentially had a week extra to prepare for the team they probably thought after Miami went up 3-0. They probably
Mhm.
started preparing at least
Yeah, I would
for
hope.
Miami. And maybe as it got to 3-3 or 3-2, they're like, oh, maybe put a little more Boston tape in.
Mhm.
But they've been essentially preparing for another week
That's an
for
excellent point.
for Miami. So I think Denver, as long as the shots are falling and they're not super rusty, I think they're in a great spot to be able to win game one. Before we get to the coaches, real quick on your part, which of the two studs on these teams, the two stars we're talking about, Jamal Murray, I guess you could throw in there, but let's just say Jokic or Jimmy Butler, which one of those two do you think is more likely to have a Hall of Fame standout run in this finals?
I will cop out and say whichever team wins.
Oh, come on.
It will have needed to be
Then tell me to predict. You basically tell me who you think you'll predict to win.
right. And I'm taking Denver in 6, but I'm so gun shy with it that it surprise me if Jimmy Butler caps off what really has been a Hall of Fame playoffs with a Hall of Fame championship. No, it will not surprise me at this point. And Jimmy Butler, above all else, will have earned it more than just about anybody I can remember in recent history, as far as single-handedly willing a team, putting them on his back, and making it happen. But if Denver gets it, Jokic is going to have to be everything that Jokic has been to get them here this far.
I will say this: Jimmy Butler through like game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals, amazing, right? But I think it was game 4 or 5. He only put like 15 points in or something. There's a time where he got a little got caught up to him. You know, he did not have the best final or like that best 3-game stretch after that 3-0 as he did the 3-0 and basically the entire playoffs before. So the Hemi Butler discussion quieted a little bit before he had a pretty good game 7 for Miami.
And yet all the others stepped up, right?
No, exactly.
All the others stepped up, and he was an effective decoy.
But I mean, if someone's going to have the Hall of Fame like series, I think it's going to be Joker. If it's going to be one of the two, because I think he has the matchups in his favor to be able to sort of 2 or 3 times this series go for 40, and put up a number.
This may put the pressure on Denver more, but I think Jokic has to have that more.
He has to have it more?
Yeah, whereas Jimmy Butler can, I think, maybe not be at the same ridiculous, video game level that he was at his peak in the playoffs here. But if he's anywhere close to that, the rest of the Heat seems so locked in and unfazed by this journey that I think they're good enough. I mean, to steal a phrase from Spo and to steal it from Jimmy Butler, I think they're good enough. I think Denver, not having been to this level before, and with the rust, and again, if you lose game 1 and all of a sudden that pressure is on, like, they better take this seriously. They better come in and punch hard and not stop punching, because if you leave your chin open, Miami's going to connect at least a couple. Like, you better take them out early. Run the Heat out of Denver, Colorado in those first 2 games and make them play from behind.
Let's talk coaching stuff. It turns out Shams Charania is reporting that Monty Williams is going to Detroit. But after he said it looks like no to a first contract offer for about $72 million for 6 years. I think I got that right. Yeah, 6 years, $72 million. Turns out that deal is going to be closer to 8 years, $100 million. Joe, I don't want to poo-poo here on Monty Williams at all. I feel like Denver did not have leverage in this situation to offer Monty Williams $100 million because, if I'm not mistaken, Monty Williams is not Greg Popovich. Maybe Larry Brown could have come back in for that kind of money.
False.
So I mean, it's one. I don't know, Joe. I don't think I was expecting to hear a ton of new names with the coaching, although there's one we'll talk about in just a second. But that feels like a lot for Monty Williams. Am I way off in thinking that? It's a long-term commitment and a lot of money for, a guy that had a pretty good roster, did get to the places they hadn't been before, But now it's going to
Exactly.
come into a completely different type of situation.
So I think the draw here for the Pistons to Monty Williams, who, by the way, as we had talked about before, could have been a coaching candidate in any of the openings around the league, whether it's a rebuild or a team that was trying to get to the next level and wanted to take a turn with Monty. But Monty Williams came into Phoenix, a team that had a bunch of talent, but no culture, zero culture, and no direction for that talent. They had been stockpiling picks for years, and he helped build a culture. He helped build an infrastructure. He helped structure it around the right stars and put them in that position to not only begin making the playoffs, but then to become a true contender. And yes, they fell short, and we can all question whether Monty Williams is the guy to take you to a championship, but the Detroit Pistons are not trying to get to a championship. The Detroit Pistons are trying to get out of the cellar and to get direction, which is something, honestly, that franchise has lacked since Larry Brown and since the Bad Boys 2 were done. Really, as soon as Flip Saunders came in, rest in peace, it has been downhill ever since, coasting off of what was built before, and then just an absolute swampland over the last 15 years of some big trades, some big free agent signings, some draft picks that panned out, but none of it ever really mattered. The best you got was maybe an 8th seed. Most of the time you were at the bottom of the division, and over the last few years, it's been young guys and absolutely the bottom of the pack. And so I get why Detroit, willing to swing big, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of years, it's a lot of pressure. But at the same time, it's the Detroit Pistons. Nobody is expecting anything out of them for a couple of years. They're going to have a number 5 draft pick. Again, they miss out on the Wemby sweepstakes, but there is a really good platform, a foundation of talent that's starting there. Monty did similar things, honestly, with the OKC Thunder, too. So I see why this is the guy for this time, just maybe not for that price tag. But, man, get that paycheck, Monty Williams. Get it. You deserve it, man.
The stories out there is that he said no to the $72 million, and that Detroit basically came back and said, all right, we'll sweeten the deal. We sort of want this. And I feel like it's a desperate situation or desperate play, but I think it's a desperate situation. I think they know that they have good young talent there, that there is as you mentioned, a foundation there that can be built upon. We have seen OKC do it and be exciting. This wouldn't be the first time this has happened, even in the last couple of years. We've seen these younger teams have gotten high draft picks before start to build up a little bit and be better, or maybe teasing the play-in this next year, something like that. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure if they're just a coach away like a Monty Williams would be. He did play the leverage game pretty well for himself there. But I think Detroit is just like, we can't keep revolving this door. We need a name that people will be attracted to and that we'll listen to. And granted, Monty Williams never won it all, even though he was a favorite to be able to do so. He did get a team that doesn't often go to the finals, and did have that team playing deep in the playoffs, I think, the year after. I think it was this year when they didn't do as much as we thought they'd be able to do. So, granted, he's on the back end of that rise, for what we do with Phoenix. It's hard for me. It's not my money, so I guess I can criticize it all I want. But if I was Detroit, I can understand like being desperate to go get this as opposed to just throwing up another assistant name, which we're going to bring up in a second.
I'll say I love the pick. I love the match. I love it, love it, love it.
Okay.
I don't love the price tag in the years, but again, that's Detroit's money to burn. And who else are they spending it on right now until you get this to be a place that people want to go again and a place that people respect again? This is how you're going to spend your money. And this is the best guy on the market, I think, to be able to take that shot, to give them stability, to be able to reach players, to be a father figure, also a coach, but also a guy who connects on that friendship level and that deeper interpersonal level. And that's a tough combination to be able to find in the NBA, a coach who can do all those things. So this is as good a shot as you're going to get. And let's see what Monty does there.
High-end free agents and players who are under contract that have some control and leverage over where they get traded to. don't want to go to Detroit right now, I should say.
Right.
So you got to build something there. So why not start with a young foundation and a good coach and see what you can sort of build that thing back into. Joel, would go to the Milwaukee Buckaroos, who have their new head coach, and it was, as we all predicted again, Joel, we always crush these coaching searches. Adrian Griffin, a former Raptors assistant. I say former because he is now a head coach in the National Basketball Association of America. Joel, I've looked into this young fella many, many times. I still don't feel like I know anything about him. So do you have any read or feel on what you think Adrian Griffin is, a positive or a neutral or anything for this franchise?
I love that Adrian Griffin is finally getting a head coaching shot. His name has been around for a while. He's had a lot of interviews. It feels like it's time. This is one of those where I don't love the match because to take a first-time coach who, at least, it's not like this is his first time coaching anything. He's been an assistant for a long time. He was a role player in the NBA for a long time. He's been in the Milwaukee organization before as an assistant coach. So it's not as if he's completely wet behind the ears. But this is a team that is former champions, that expects to be champions, that was the number one seed. There's a lot of pressure here, especially for a first-time head coach. I don't love it, especially knowing that apparently Nick Nurse was available. Last time we talked about this, it was like, Nurse really isn't taking too many calls, or at least if he is, it's been real quiet. He's not showing up on people's lists, and then all of a sudden he winds up in Philly. Nick Nurse was the guy to be in Milwaukee. That was the guy you wanted, and that's no disrespect to Adrian Griffin. Did we just text back and forth about that? We were just texting.
Okay.
No disrespect to Adrian Griffin. I think, but it feels like a Charlotte or a Portland or Houston, like those are the type of places where or a Detroit to come in, get going, or in Toronto, for crying out loud. Like Milwaukee, it's going to be tough, and there's some high stakes there because you got to keep Giannis happy, even though I know he's been as loyal as they come. So we'll see with Adrian Griffin. The one thing I will say, there's been a lot of guys who have come in over the last 10 years. Steve Kerr, David Blatt, Ty Lue, Nick Nurse, guys that came in and did not have head coaching experience with some other NBA team and won an NBA championship or went to an NBA finals. In the case of David Blatt, like there's been guys that have done it. And so maybe there's the feeling that being a first-time head coach is not so much of a hindrance as it used to be for coming in. But we still have seen plenty of guys who do flame out, though that typically is guys going into really bad situations or coming straight out of college and trying to jump into the NBA, never having done it before. So I love that Adrian Griffin's getting a shot. We're going to see what he's made of. Ime Udoka, Joe Mazzulla, these are guys who also first-time head coaches who did really positive things in their first go-around. But yeah, you don't want to be Adrian Griffin deep in the playoffs and suddenly getting the Joe Mazzulla questions where it's like, was he really ready for this or not?
Right.
That's the concern in Milwaukee.
By the way, Joe Mazzulla handled questions amazingly well during the Eastern Conference Finals. Just fantastic. There was one game. It was game one where Joe Mazzulla was asked about whether or not the team was prepared, and it sounded like he was pissed off about being asked about being prepared, like he was against Philadelphia. He's like, "Oh, we were prepared. We were totally prepared. We let go of the rope. We were prepared, though. We were prepared." It's like, all right, kiddo, that doesn't sound right, but okay, very weird. So being put in that kind of spotlight, especially a team that we think is going to be deep into the playoffs next year, should be talent-wise. Definitely should be that way. That they should be able to, just on the talent, get a decent seed in the East. We'll see what he is as a coach. He's been a top assistant just about everywhere he's been. Yeah. He's been the top assistant for Billy Donovan. He coached under Tom Thibodeau. He's a top guy there at Toronto. He's got some international experience coaching with Steph Curry up in the field.
He deserves this. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. He deserves it.
I mean, I call him a young fella. He's like 50. So, like, 50's not old. It's just he's a guy that I don't know personally what his philosophy is. I keep hearing like he's been instrumental in Toronto being able to win the world title a few years ago, and
he's been a defensive guy first and foremost. Yep.
So, that's something Milwaukee could use a little bit more emphasis on. And I think, what I should say, I don't have a firm opinion on the guy, to be honest with you. I just know that he coached under the greatest coach ever, Tom Thibodeau, and so he's got to be fine as long as he's got. Who was it? He was hired first by you said Milwaukee, right? Was it Milwaukee? Who's the coach?
I think his first assistant job was in Milwaukee. I do not remember who his coach.
Is that did they go back to Scott Skiles?
I don't know, and I'll try to find out for next time. Right. But yeah,
I just thought you throw that in the back of the brain nugget. We'll find out. Mm-hmm. By the way, we'll not readdress that the next episode because we never do. Joel, that's going to do it for us. You have predicted Denver in 6 and Nikola Jokic to average 53 a game, and that is a.
By the way, before we go, Nick Nurse to Philadelphia, a coup, an absolute coup. That was the guy.
Did we not talk about that?
We did not talk about Nurse. No.
Oh, I thought we talked about it last week.
No.
Okay, so Nick Nurse to Philadelphia. Yeah, we thought both of us talked about him going to Milwaukee. That made 100% sense for him to go to Milwaukee. But again, he wasn't taking a bunch of phone calls, like I said. So you're like, oh, I guess maybe he takes a year off. I don't know. And then you hear the news that he's now going to coach Joel Embiid. And even though I feel like I've given up on Philadelphia as ever predicting him, Nick Nurse with Joel Embiid, I'm very intrigued to see what that ends up looking like next year, because that is a good coach, a better coach than Doc Rivers, and I think a more game-to-game manager-focused coach.
The closest thing we have to another Eric Spoelstra, in all honesty, as far as getting guys ready to play throughout the year, coaching guys up way beyond their talent level, and being able to throw all sorts of crazy looks at you and have his team be able to execute it. Like, how does James Harden fit into that is a really good question for another time. But
there's a few good questions there. James Harden doesn't seem like one that he will like, but James Harden, as soon as the season was over, it's like, hey, I might talk to other people. Who knows? That's fine. Whoever you think is going to pay you $50 million next year, enjoy that. Should not be Philadelphia.
Who's got the strip clubs?
That's right. Go back to Houston, baby. That's what Ime Udoka needs. He and that young team need a little bit more strip club help. Joe, sounds like that's the end of the Udonis Haslem edition. We're dedicating the Udonis Haslem edition to him. On the same episode, we predict his team to lose in 6. I like it. Very cold-blooded by Joel. Very, very cold-blooded.
I'm sure UD will prove us wrong. I'm terrified of that happening. But if you want the video version of this show, you can like, share, subscribe on YouTube. If you want audio only, Spreaker, Spotify, iTunes, wherever you get your podcasts. And we will do this again next week when we will have a handful of games under our belt already.
One word answer, Joel. Who do you want to win?
Denver.
Same.